This video is sponsored by Sakura Co. Well, everyone seemed to like the video about the first Great Shinobi World War, so we might as well cover the other three. I don't know if I'm gonna cover the fourth one yet. It gets pretty well covered with the show, but we'll put a question mark next to it. And it's a good thing everybody liked the first one so much because it's arguably the least important out of the three we're gonna talk about. That's right, the second Great Shinobi World War is much more important than the first one, though less Kages died. But that's because the first Great Shinobi World War taught them how to make three-man teams, so they could stop sending their most powerful people, aka the Kages, to the front lines. Before we talk about literally any of that though, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling particularly feisty, hit the join button under my profile to become a member of the Weeb Alliance over here on YouTube. You'll get access to things like additional content, 3 to 4 extra videos a month from me, talking everything from anime videos that aren't quite long enough to make full-fledged YouTube videos, or vlog content, like when me and my girlfriend just went to Hawaii. You also get access to badges and emotes special to the Weeb Alliance. And those who join in a Joni get a special shout out at the end of every YouTube video. But before we get into all that, guys, we have a return sponsor. You guys already know my favorite sponsor just sent us a double feature. Today we got Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. But what are the differences between these two? Tokyo Treat will send you up to 20 of limited edition specific to Japan current snacks, and each month has a theme. This month's theme for both Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. is Sakura. No, not Sasuke's wife, the flower. But when you open this box as somebody who doesn't speak Japanese, things like this item right here might be a bit intimidating. That is what our 24-page booklet is for. With the use of this booklet that tells us everything from the backstory of the snack to the allergens, we can find out that these are Sakura Karinto. But the only way to truly experience the snack is trying it. Oh my god. It tastes like a cinnamon sugar donut. But that's enough about Tokyo Treat. Let's talk about Sakura Co. With the Sakura Co box, you'll be receiving up to 20 authentic and artisanal Japanese snacks every month. Sakura Co even partners with local Japanese snack makers to pass down the lineage of Japanese snacking that has lasted for 100 years. But what's truly cool about Sakura Co is that on top of these 20 snacks, you also get one piece of tableware a month. I got a little Sakura bowl. And just like with Tokyo Treat, let's say you find a snack you can't quite identify. Bust open our pamphlet here and you'll quickly understand. Apparently, this is a senbai boat. It's a confectionery boat filled with different flavored crackers. Down the hatch. It's the perfect touch of savory mixed in with all of your other sweet snacks. So what are you guys waiting for? Use code NCHammer0322 at checkout to get $5 off your first order from Sakura Co or Tokyo Treat. Don't go just typing out Sakura Co or TokyoTreat.com, guys. Please use the links in my description or my pinned comment. Let's get to snacking. So while this war was technically more important than the first war, we know way less about it. I mean, we can make some assumptions, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll tell you what is fact and what is assumed. But yeah, with no further ado, let's get into what we know. So it's widely believed that this war was between the sand, the stone, and the leaf. We know this for a couple of reasons. One, and the most obvious one to us, is that Nagato states that there was a war between the sand, the stone, and the leaf. And while we don't necessarily know if he's talking about the second Great Shinobi World War or the third Great Shinobi World War, we can kind of assume it's the second. There is some problems with assuming that Nagato is talking about the second Great Shinobi World War in this circumstance though, because he states, while working with Hanzo to resolve this conflict, that being Hanzo and the Akatsuki working together, that Yahiko is ambushed and killed. This referring to the moment when Hanzo and Danzo formed their super team of evilness to kidnap Konan and force Nagato to stab Yahiko with a kunai. Except instead of Yahiko allowing Nagato to stab him, he just stabbed himself. And that's all fine and good. Obviously, Yahiko dies. We all know that. It was at the hands of Danzo and Hanzo. We all know that. But the problem is, Yahiko has met Tobi. In fact, he was saved by Tobi in the third Great Ninja War. So that kind of makes us think that the conflict that Nagato is referring to might be the third Great Ninja War. But the only problem with this is that we know Konoha and the Hidden Stone weren't fighting in the Hidden Rain during the third Great Shinobi World War. We know that because we know they were fighting in the village hidden in the grass. But that's for the next video. For the moment, let's just assume Nagato messed up or Kishimoto lost track of what war he was talking about. Our interested party in this second Great Shinobi World War are the Hidden Stone, the Hidden Sand, the Leaf, and the Hidden Rain. But why did this war start? Didn't we just sign in our armistice. And while it is true, about 20 years prior to the start of the Second Great Shinobi World War, an armistice was signed between all of the major nations. Just like how World War I in real life had caused all of Europe to fall into economic chaos, the same thing had happened to the Shinobi villages. Think about the impact of the First Great Shinobi World War. Most villages had lost 2 Kage in a lot of land. To assume that nations would be able to bounce back quickly is a lot to ask. But the problem wasn't how quickly nations bounced back. It was how quickly they bounced back in comparison to each other. Richer villages with more fertile land like the Hidden Leaf were able to bounce back quicker. But smaller villages that served as the battleground for a lot of the fights in the First War didn't bounce back as quickly. And in these 20 years where villages tried to rebuild, economic disparity grew. Poorer nations became fed up with the resource hoarding of richer nations. And before they knew it, poorer nations split into factions, some pro-war, some pro-peace. Pro-war factions thought it was their fair right to access of materials and resources that these richer countries already had. So they decided to use military might to take what they believed was their fair right back. Only problem is this began a lot of skirmishes along the borders of major nations, specifically the borders of the Hidden Stone and the Hidden Sand. Because think about it, the Hidden Stone and the Hidden Sand are economically the 2 weakest major villages. And yet, very close to them, almost their neighbors, there's some small villages between them, sits one of the richest nations on Earth, the Hidden Leaf. And in these smaller villages sits some very fertile land, like the village hidden in the rain, or the village hidden in the grass, or the village hidden in the whirlpools. So naturally, these 2 villages, which were already very centric on military might, began to use said military might to push into these fertile lands. Only problem, that's a problem, but not for the major villages involved in this war. It's a major problem for the villages between these villages. Smack dab directly between the sand, the stone, and the leaf is the Hidden Rain. And that's not where you want to be. Konoha knew that better than anything, considering they were in the middle of the First Great Shinobi World War. And while the losses from the 3 great major villages would be severe, for example, Sakumo Hatake, Kakashi's father, killed Sasori's parents, who were shinobi for the Hidden Sand, which tells us that the Hidden Leaf and the Hidden Sand were in combat. Dan, Tsunade's lover, dies at the hands of shinobi whose affiliation we don't know, but some context clue tells us they're from the Hidden Stone. This is mostly because of how Dan died. Now, I'm making an assumption here, but we know the Hidden Stone uses a lot of rock-based jutsus. They use largely Earth Release. And Dan dies from a relatively blunt force trauma event. A blunt force trauma event so hard that it blew his kidneys to pieces. This is why Tsunade wasn't able to save him, because she couldn't reform an entire new organ. See, Tsunade was able to stop the bleeding from Dan's injuries, but he wasn't able to reform an organ, and therefore Dan's blood was too dirty for him to continue living. A fun little caveat here is Shizune, you know, Tsunade's helper, is Dan's cousin or niece. I don't remember. And Shizune's entire power as a healer is based around her ability to create cells with her yin-yang release. So Shizune is actually the only healer on Earth that we know of that can completely reform an organ in somebody else without the use of the 100 heals. Little too late, but hey, listen, at least she can stop other people from dying of kidney failure. And while losses like these were terrible and many for the major nations, none was worse than what was happening in the Hidden Rain. This is the war that made the Ame orphans the Ame orphans. They were just the Ame kids before this. But this is also the war that made Hanzo the Salamander, Hanzo the Salamander. As far as we know, the Hidden Rain doesn't have much in the way of military might. They're a small, relatively poor nation. But what we do know is that they had some kind of medical advances, and technological ones at that, because their village was significantly more complicated and advanced than every other village we had seen. So, using these medical and technological advancements, they were able to make, yes, make Hanzo the Salamander. Hanzo was a child, a regular one at that, when he had a poison sac from a black salamander that lives in a river in the Hidden Rain transplanted into him. This allowed him to create poison, the same poison that black salamander from the river could make. And while I'm not going to get into Hanzo's entire life story, I've already done that right here, let's get into a couple of his military exploits. Hanzo, as we know it, was the only person defending the Hidden Rain. Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan were not old enough, and like I said, we didn't see any other shinobi from there. But the Hidden Rain decided to get involved in this war when they realized that their country was just becoming a battleground for bigger nations. So in order to fight back, they sent Hanzo to fight at least Konoha. I say at least Konoha because we don't know if he fought the Hidden Stone or the Hidden Sand. Hanzo had skirmishes with smaller groups of shinobi that he wiped the floor with, so Konoha decided to send an entire platoon to take him out. A platoon led by Tsunade, Jarriah, and Orochimaru. 3 massively high-level Jonin that the Leaf had chosen to lead the platoon in hopes of defeating the #1 threat in the Second Great Shinobi World War. And what happened? Hanzo killed everyone in the platoon except for those 3. See, Hanzo has a proclivity for keeping powerful people alive. He did it for Mifune when they fought their first time because he wanted to fight Mifune again when he had acquired more strength. Early life Hanzo was very different from late life Hanzo. He was constantly looking for ways to get stronger. And just like a lot of other people in anime history, he figured that fighting strong people was his only way to get stronger. So as Team Hiruzen sat there, ready to die, Hanzo decided to take pity on them. In fact, he stated it was impressive they were even still standing, and because it was so impressive they were still standing, that he would name them the 3 legendary Sannin. Hanzo let Jarriah, Orochimaru, and Tsunade live. If he had wanted to, he could have killed them. And sure, you can say that these were not their peak powers. You'd probably be right. Considering this took place about 20 years after the First Great Shinobi World War, we can assume they were all in their early to mid-20s. We don't know if Tsunade had access to the 100 healings yet, because during the Second Great Shinobi World War, she wore a forehead protector, and that's where her Byakuya seal is. Orochimaru was absolutely not at peak power. He still had 40 more years of researching ninjutsu, Edo Tensei, curse marks, all of that to make him exponentially more powerful. Jarriah might have been close to peak power. We know that during the Second Great Shinobi World War, Jarriah had at least been to Mount Muabuko. We know that he had received a prophecy from the Great Toad Sage saying he would meet the child of prophecy. That's why he thought it was going to be Nagato. We also know from a filler episode that he fell to Mount Muabuko when he reverse summoned himself there trying to summon a summoning animal. So at this point in time, Jarriah should have at least had Sage Mode. So even if they were at 75% of their total power as a group, that is still insane that Hanzo was able to spare them. But what's funny is that's not even the most insane thing that Hanzo did. Hanzo survived multiple fights against Granny Chiu. And I know what you're saying, oh, Granny Chiu, who cares, right? Granny Chiu was considered one of the greatest military assets in the history of the Hidden Sand. In the same way that Hanzo was the cornerstone of the Hidden Rain's military might, Granny Chiu was the cornerstone of the Hidden Sands. Considering that puppetry had just been recently created by the second Kazekage, Granny Chiu was a prodigy, and she was responsible for thousands of kills in the Second Great Shinobi World War. We know that she and Hanzo fought several times because this is how she was able to create an antidote to Hanzo's salamander poison. So this largely leads us to assume that Hanzo also beat back the forces of the Hidden Sand. So in summation, yes, all the major nations were fighting, but they were trying to find the fastest way into each other's nations. And Hanzo the Salamander stood in between 3 great shinobi nations and beat them all back. Now, this could lead to 2 possible conclusions for us. 1, it took the Hidden Rain a little while to get involved in the war, or 2, after realizing that there was no going through the Hidden Rain, the major villages started to go around the Hidden Rain to fight each other. Now, why do I say this? Because it is a well-documented and well-known fact that Tsunade gained her prestige as the greatest healer ever by largely counteracting the majority of Granny Chiu's poisons. Remember when I said Granny Chiu was a cornerstone of the Hidden Sands might? It's because she had manufactured hundreds of unique poisons, all of which had no antidotes. With just one slice of your skin with her puppet, you would be infected with a poison that had never been seen before, making Granny Chiu one of the most successful killers in the history of Naruto. But Tsunade's entire purpose on the battlefield during the Second Great Shinobi World War was counteracting these poisons. Tsunade treated thousands of people and created antidotes for these poisons on the battlefield, which would imply at some point or another that the Hidden Sand and Konoha were able to fight each other. My personal favorite take, they just went around the rain. But this wasn't the only thing that Tsunade achieved during the Second Great Shinobi World War. Tsunade, devastated at the loss of both Dan and her little brother, forced Konoha to consider to add a healer to every 3-man shinobi group, forever once again reinventing how war was done. In fact, this one change is widely believed to be the reason that Konoha won the Second Great Shinobi World War. By losing less ninja, you got more people to fight. But since we're talking about the repercussions of this war and what it established for Naruto lore, let's get into that. Yes, this was the war that essentially created the medical ninjutsu field. Hiruzen said that there wouldn't be enough resources to train medical ninjas to add to each 13. So Tsunade took it upon herself to train medical ninjas, and thus reformed how three-man groups were made, which significantly improved mission success and survivability, once again rocketing Konoha to the front of the pack. This is also the war where Sakamo Hatake, Kakashi's father, earned himself the name the White Fang. This was most likely done in the Hidden Sand, where, like I said earlier, he was responsible for killing Sasori's parents, an event that made Sasori leave the Hidden Sand and join the Akatsuki, also an event that made Granny Chiu swear to achieve vengeance on Sakamo Hatake. Ironically, it's also believed that during this war was when Sakamo Hatake failed his mission to save his friends, an event that made him become ostracized and then later commit suicide, something that significantly shaped his son Kakashi. This was also the war that killed the Ame orphans' parents, which led Jarriah to stumble upon them and then subsequently raised them for a couple of years. It's at this point that Nagato realizes he wants to stop war and forms the Akatsuki, the very Akatsuki that Sasori would later join because of the Second Great Shinobi World War. So while this war may have killed less Kage, it was way more important in terms of the grander scheme of Naruto, because we know for a fact that Inoki survived it because he was obviously in Naruto. We know the third Raikage survived it because he died in the Third Great Shinobi World War. We know the third Kazekage survived it because he was killed by Sasori later on. And we know Hiruzen survived it because he didn't die till Orochimaru killed him. And the Mist Village wasn't even involved. That's the Second Great Shinobi World War. I hope that's enough information for you. It's about all we had. A lot of that was assumptions. But when Kishimoto won't give you the words, sometimes you gotta fill in the blanks. If you guys learned anything new or even just enjoyed yourself, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell, and if you really enjoyed yourself, hit the join button. Listen, I'm not saying Hanzo the Salamander is the baddest dude in Naruto history, but imagine being a solo army against 3 great nations. I mean, Madara did it, but that's neither here nor there.